श्रावण महिना फुल
हेलो, मुझे आपकी वॉइस नहीं सुनाई दे रही। अभी चालू नहीं हुआ है।
Good evening. Good evening, sir. Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you.
Good evening, sir. Dr. Dhananjay? Yes. Good evening, sir. Good evening. Can you hear my voice? Voice clear?
Voice is clear.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Shall we start the program, sir?
Yeah, we can go ahead. Please, you, as
Yes.
per your
Schedule. Yes, sir. We can start the program, sir. We can start. This is the host speaking, sir, actually.
Hello, sir. Doctor, sir.
Are you talking to me, sir?
Yes, Doctor, sir. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm. Are you? Yes,
Okay.
I'm hearing you.
Okay.
I'm hearing you, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. people are coming, I think so.
Yes, we can start.
Shall we?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Should we start? Okay. Right. So,
Sir, doctor, sir, I couldn't hear your voice.
Yeah, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can
Yes.
hear you now, sir. Yes.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Your voice, I think,
am I audible?
no. Dr. Dhananjay is speaking, but his voice is not audible.
To maintain the decorum of the meet, here are a few points I want every single participant to follow. Hello?
Sure. Okay.
Just a few just a few rules for maintaining the decorum. Now, the first thing is I request all the participants to be on mute when you're not speaking, number one. Number two, I request you to kindly not negligently leave your mic on because that creates a lot of disturbance, which makes it impossible for the Zoom meeting to happen smoothly. The third thing is I also request you to keep your camera not switched on if you are not stationed to one place. But please do stay connected with us all the same. Also use full screen for better visuals, and we appreciate questions. However, you will have to wait until the forum is declared open for questions. Now we move ahead. The meeting of two eternities, the past and the future, is precisely the present moment. The meeting of two eternities, the past and future, is precisely the present moment, by Henry David Thoreau. Good evening, everyone. I am deeply appreciative of each and every person connected with us right now on the Zoom platform for today's e-deliberation meet titled New Education Policy 2020, Facts and Folly. I request all our participants to remain connected with us till the very end of the program to take home the eye-opening discussion lines this meet aims to bring forth to you so that you and me can stop, think over, and move ahead in a meaningful direction. My dear participants, coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress. Working together is success, says Henry Ford. At the moment, all the participants with us on the Zoom meet are greeted with a warm welcome. And now we will have the General Secretary of All India SC/ST OBC Minorities Doctors and Employees Association, New Delhi, and a remarkable plastic surgeon and role model who lives the payback to society way of life, Dr. Dhananjay Kumar, to deliver the welcome address. Over to you, Dr. Dhananjay Kumar, for the welcome address. Dr. Dhananjay, are you there? We are not able to hear you. You're not audible, sir. I request the host to kindly look into this. Host, Mr.
Yes.
Dr. Dhananjay is, yeah,
Yes,
now, yes.
I'm just trying to contact him through chat.
Okay, okay.
I'll do it. Yeah.
Right.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you now, sir. Please go ahead. Dr. Dhananjay, we are able to hear you. You're audible. Dr. Dhananjay, am I audible to you?
Doctor, can you hear me? Is the host speaking? Doctor, sir, can you hear me? We can't hear from you, sir.
I don't think he's speaking right now.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Can somebody contact him via phone, please?
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes. I think he has a problem with the mic, or I don't know, there's some problem. He's not able to hear us. We're not able to hear him.
Doctor Saab.
हेलो हेलो भाई कुछ सुन नहीं रहा है ना
Mute பண்ணுப்பா.
हेलो
Rakesh.
Mute பண்றேன் sir. Mute பண்றேன் sir.
ஆ.
किसी की आवाज
Participants, my ladies and gentlemen, participants, आप थोड़ा सा पेशेंस रखिए. एक्चुअली डॉक्टर धनंजय का माइक जो है वो प्रॉपर नहीं है, शायद कुछ प्रॉब्लम है, इसीलिए हम चाहते हैं कि आप थोड़ी देर पेशेंस मेंटेन करें.
It seems that audio is not coming for doctor, sir. I'm not
Actually,
able.
his mobile is in mute. His
Okay.
mic is in mute.
Yes, sir. Mute. It's unmuted, sir. Actually,
But you tell.
I told him in the personal chat, sir.
Okay.
He's saying that audio is not coming. I am not able to hear.
Okay, let me start now.
Some technical problem, sir.
So can we move on to the next sequence as per the program flow?
Yes.
Participants, sorry about that. Is that Dr. Dhananjay now? Participants. Okay, Dr. Dhananjay, please go ahead. Kindly deliver the welcome address, please. You are perfectly audible now. Kindly deliver the welcome address, please. Okay, audience, I'm extremely sorry for the inconvenience that occurred. We're moving ahead, and my dear participants, a winner is a dreamer who never gives up, says Nelson Mandela. In politics, you have to be an unyielding dreamer if your goal is to get your people win and create history. We are fortunate to have such an unyielding political visionary amidst us today, Mr. Jeevan Kumar Malla, the National President of Bahujan Dravida Party, New Delhi. Sir, I request you to deliver the introductory note and preside over. Over to you, Mr. Jeevan Kumar Malla.
Thank you very much. It's audible for you. Everybody?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay.
Kindly.
Yes, sir. Audible, sir.
Okay. So I am Jeevan Kumar Malla, National President, Bahujan Dravida Party. This Zoom meeting is historically significant as it is attended by the people from the 4 border states of India like Kanyakumari, Kashmir, Gujarat, and Assam. A few changes took place as a result of holding 555 seminars across India by our movement against the 2009 Right to Education Act passed by Congress government. We all agree that India has a serious problem and our Bahujan Dravida people, that is SC, ST, OBC and religious minority, have a serious problem. India's problem is us, because we, the 97% are here. India is the only country in the world where the real or original natives are facing problems. Why? Settlers need a slave to rule the natives of the land since they were mere settlers. Naturally, fear infected them. That's why they needed a religion not to express their fear. So they needed a philosophy for the religion, and based upon that philosophy, they have been enslaving the natives and ruling too. It was different to be a slave during the regime of monarchy without a democracy. But even after a democracy has blossomed, the microscope minority community is continuing to enslave the majority community. This means the problem remains with the majority, not with microscope community. Every time you look at yourself, wherever you are and SC, ST, OBC, or MBC, or Buddhist, or Sikh, or Christian, or Muslim. You represent a community of India that is not wanted, and thereby you are not wanted. Hence, you face this fact. You can started plotting a course of action that will make you appear intelligent instead of unintelligent. What you and I need to do is learn to forget our difference of caste. We are made to mourn over ourselves on our own soil by the settler pilgrims called Brahmins. They were the ones who brought you to this condition. We know we have a common enemy. We have this in common. We have a common oppressor, a common exploiter, and a common discriminator. Once we all realize that we have a common enemy, we should unite on the basis of what we have in common. And what we have foremost in common is that enemy, the Brahmins. He is an enemy to all aboriginals. I know some of you think that some of them are not enemies. Time will tell. Dr. Ambedkar says, the history of India is nothing but a history of marital conflict between Buddhism and Brahminism. The history of India of the last 2000 years is the history of 85% natives being denied even their basic human rights. There were a provision in the Brahminical religious scriptures to cut their tongues, extracting their eyes, to fill a molten lead in their ears, especially in Manusmriti, as such a reference are to be seen in ample numbers. In the absence of education, so the Sudras, SC, ST, OBCs, and converted religious minorities were forced to live a life worse than that of animals. In the middle of 19th century, with the great efforts of Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, who born in an OBC caste of Maharashtra, and with the support of British government, especially the great Lord Macaulay and others, many significant steps were taken for a spread of education among us SC, ST, OBCs of Indian society. Because of educational rights and facilities extend to the native of India, some progress happened. After Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, Chhatrapati Shahuji Maharaja, the king of Kolhapur states, he belongs to OBC community, further extend these facilities and right into the realm of government jobs by providing a 50% reservation in his kingdom. Later, Baba Sahib Dr. Ambedkar carried forward the caravan left by these two great personalities with more vigor. He made a numerous provisions in the Constitution of India that he wrote for the educational, social, and economic development of the oppressed people, especially the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. As a result of this constitution provision, this section have moved forward in all spheres of life, despite the fact that there have been many attempts by the successive Manuwadi government to scuttle all these provisions on the journey of progress in the past 60 to 70 years. Then came Manevar Kansiramji, who carried forward the Phule to Ambedkar movement to fulfill the dreams of Baba Sahib Dr. Ambedkar. But his historical Bahujan movement of this country has eventually fallen into the trap of shellfish on short-sighted elements. That's why things have started going from bad to worse. The judiciary also look like it has always wanted to finish the constitution of India through their verdicts. Some of the recent judgment are great example that expose the real face of Brahminism. It is so difficult to see the difference between right to education 2009 and New Education Policy 2020. The so-called New Education Policy the so-called New Education Policy 2020 is nothing but an extension of previous Right to Education Act 2009. Through this Provision Act, the government attempt to break the educational spine of the SC/ST OBC people of this country. Clause number 16 of the Right to Education Act 2009 says, no child attempted in a school shall be held back in any class or expelled from school till the completion of elementary education. Within these 10 years from the passing of this act, a drastic fall in the level of learning among us, millions of children across the country at a primary this country is going to have now the BJP central government is trying to choke the education of majority SC/ST OBC people of the country through this new education policy. This country is going to have the entire education system transferred into the hands of predators, eagles, which don't even spare the dead carcass. After independence, the Ministry of HRD has been constantly controlled by the Brahmin minister only. All the top Brahminical political parties, especially Congress, BJP, Communist, and their chamcha political parties together have got so many bills passed in the Parliament of India that our education rights and right to reservation in jobs, etc., are on the verge of collapse and ultimate decimation. Why are we organizing only the educated class for this Zoom meeting? We will discuss a few of the important reasons here. The educated class is the intellectual class. The educated class possesses here characteristics. The educated class acquires a new vision of life. With this newly acquired vision, the educated class analyzes and understand its present life and status. If a man from the educated class feels that his life is inferior, he thinks of changing it. He dreams of such a system in which his life will not be inferior. Therefore, the intellectual class dreams of a new society and a new system. Second one is, how did such a system which enforced inferiority come to be created? What were the principal reasons behind its creations? Whose interests are secured by such a system? Why does it function only to secure the interest of a few? To analyze all these questions, a new viewpoint is needed. This viewpoint is nothing but analytical science. Only intellectual class can process that kind of analytical and critical study. Only the intellectual class can create an organization to change the old, decaying and rotten system of inequality, and in its place establish the just a system of his dream. The intellectual class knows that means and resources are needed to achieve these objectives. The intellectual class realizes the importance of means and resource in the fight for change. The intellectual class possesses the above mentioned three characteristics. It is only for this reason that Mahatma Jyotiba Phule and Baba Sahib Dr. Ambedkar gave priority for a creations of an intellectual class in the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and other backward classes. In fact, from the movement run by Mahatma Jyotiba Phule from 1848 to 1890 and Baba Sahib Dr. Ambedkar, the present intellectual class has been created. So, my dear Bahujan brothers and sisters, it is because of the special characteristics of your class, the intellectual class, that organizing this class becomes a primary goal in the fight for change. If the intellectual class is organized, the effort we put in our fight for reclaiming what is ours will fall in place. The movement can become a powerful movement only with your involvement in it. The intellectual class must come to the forefront to do this work. The fight is big, stupendous fight for us. Our journey is a huge one. We cannot expect to reach our destination with only one wheel of our caravan moving. All the wheels have to be there and all these wheels have to move. Only then and then alone can we march ahead. If the Brahminical government thinks I am wrong for saying this, then let the government start doing its job. On this occasion, we have to remember the four noble universal truth of Buddha, that is truth of suffering. Second one is find the cause of suffering. Third one is a solution for suffering. The fourth one is implementing right action. That is more important. If we get the solution for suffering, we go for implementing a right action. Here, implementing the right action means to understand and work for the right vote campaign. With the right vote, a right action is guaranteed, because the political power is the only master key to solve all the problems. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar already told political power is the only master key. Whether it is a social problem, educational problem, cultural problem, economic problem, the political power is the only master key. Before conclude my speech, I want to remind a Martin Luther King quote that the ultimate measures of a man is not where we stand in moments of comfort, but where he stands at times of challenges and controversy. Once again, I want to remind this Martin Luther King quote that the ultimate measure of man is not where he stands in moments of comfort, but whether he stands at the time of challenge and controversy. Thank you. Jai Bhim, Jai Bharat, Jai Kanshiram, Jai Periyar.
Thank you, Mr. Jeevan Malla.
Jai Bhim.
If they say we are only as strong as we are united, as weak as we are divided. Mr. Lalit Kumar, the National President of All India OBC Mahasabha, Bhopal, was supposed to address the audience too today. Unfortunately, he has been unwell and hence could not show up for this Zoom meet. My dear audience, the wealth which never declines is not riches, but learning, says the Tirukural. Education is the passport to the future. For tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today, says Malcolm X. The next speaker we have on board is a very, very impressive educator. Well, it's Dr. Jawahar Nason we are talking about. Dr. Jawahar Nason is currently the Vice Chancellor of JSS Science and Technology University, Mysuru, and until recently, he was the Vice Chancellor of Savita University, Chennai. Dr. Nason has 2 decades of academic experience in world's leading universities across major continents, including North America, Europe, and Asia. Dr. Nason's multidimensional experience throughout his career in several capacities, including Vice Chancellor, Director, Senator, Advisor, Professor, Teacher, and a seasoned researcher in leading institutions of higher learning, has earned him excellent leadership skills and understanding in the subject of education. Dr. Nason's policy and administrative initiatives at both Western Michigan University and University Putra, Malaysia, had contributed immensely to the growth of the academic programs. To list his achievements can take hours. Such are his credentials. I invite our education visionary, Dr. Jawahar Nason, to deliver the thematic address. Over to you, Dr. Nason.
Selvi, உன் முகம் தெரிய மாட்டேங்குது.
Okay.
Yeah.
இப்போ தெரியுதா?
Right. Okay.
Yes. Over to you, Dr. Nason, please.
Thank you. Thank you, madam. Brothers and sisters, all around the country, it's a great event. I very much thank you and feel pride of being part of this deliberation today on the national education policy organized by a congregation of several organizations, grassroots organizations and political parties working for the cause of the society in India, including Bahujan Dravida Party and several other organizations are joining hands now. And Dr. Dhananjay Kumar has addressed the welcome speech. And just before me, the introductory note given by Mr. Jeevan Kumar Malla, President Bahujan Samaj Party. And today's president of this conference, Mr. Lalit Kumar G. And the vote of thanks is going to be delivered by Mr. Jitendra Kadavan. And it is being, deliberated by Professor Ponselvi. And ladies and gentlemen, good evening. This is, I think, that a gifted event organized by the organizers. And I hope that the participants of this conference would be able to at least get the glimpse of the difficulty of the times that we are living in and the problems that this great nation is facing in the hands of the policymakers, the rulers, and the neoliberal market forces, and of course, the specially cultivated community which enjoys the highest social authority in this country. And their invention is National Education Policy 2020, the 66-page document released just recently. And before that, it was about 400 plus pages in the draft document. But there is not much difference between the 400 plus pages and 66 pages, the final document. The reason is the 66 pages are just only the abstract of the draft document, which was comprised of 400 plus pages. And as I said, that the Indian society is now facing a very, very tough time in the history of India. It is as if that the American bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which even today the Japanese people are bearing the curse and facing the difficult time even today because of that event. And I think that I foresee if this national education policy is implemented in full swing, it is going to create that kind of a turbulent, disturbing, distorting, and very distressful time ahead that the Indian society would face. And with that note, why it is so? Because is education is so hard that it is going to create that havoc in this country? Yes, it is. It did in at least 60, 70 years ago in the hands of Hitler and Mussolini in Italy, Hitler in Germany. And I have to just give the glimpse of how the education policy is going to influence the society and the nation building in a greater way, as we have a lot of evidences across the country. But I would like to quote how Hitler and Mussolini did. So if you look at those samples, they had come out with an idea of nationalism, a jingoist affiliation to nationalism, and they defined what is nationalism. And they means the rulers, the policymakers, and the privileged segment of the societies those days in those countries. And with that, definition of nationalism, they forced they imposed that concept across the country, the length and breadth of the country. They wanted to command the society with that kind of nationalistic description that they had, the mandate that they had at the time. And with that mandate, they really wanted to control, influence the mindset of the people, and so that they would be in power and they would be able to achieve what they were wanted to do, what they were trying to do. So this is what happened nearly 80 years ago. They had come out with education policy, because education has become a greatest tool in fixing, influencing, formulating the mindset of the humankind. And that had successfully been implemented and achieved and realized during 80 years ago, during this time. So when a Gentile, the education minister, the advisor and mentor of Mussolini, had come up with a very strong, convincing idea of nationalism those days, which really the whole world appreciated initially when they were starting to apply that philosophy. But afterwards, the world had witnessed that it ended up only with fascism, but not in real term achievement of educational goals or improving the education sector. So that means that what did they do? They created a philosophy of education. And they said that German-centric education, Italianeto, Italian-centric education, Romanito, Roman culture, education, the Roman pride, the Roman tradition, the Italian pride, Italian tradition, German pride, pure racism, a pure German race. These were all the slogans made in the education philosophy of Hitler and Mussolini. They were all contemporary leaders who followed the same philosophy, just an adjacent brothers. So with this, what did they do? They had come out with a kind of a ministry they formulated ever first in Italy, Ministry of Education. Previously, that ministry was called Ministry of Public Instruction. And they wanted to translate that ministry, rename it as Ministry of Education. And they created extensive, extraordinary regulatory regimes and authorities. And it was highly centralized in the capital with the federal government. And there were no freedom for the provinces to address the education, the matter of education. So that means there was a great plan there. The plan was, augmented with a strong, centralized, regimentary, approach, with centralized power to implement education. And most of them were dominated by the army personnel. Even the education sector, the directors and the other officers were dominated by the army personnel and the Nazis in Germany. It was a concept. Nazism was a concept. It was a fascism. So eventually, what had happened, they created the curriculum, nationwide curriculum, a centralized curriculum. And they created national textbooks. The textbooks were created by not less than that time the president, Hitler. And he was part of the curriculum and national textbook formation. And Mussolini also was in the committee in his country. So it was a highly steered by the top-down approach. And it was centralized. The agenda, the curriculum, the textbook, and the subject matters of instruction all were decided by the central government with a strong, force, with a strong mandate and power. They managed to do that. And also the teachers. If you look at the teachers, at one time in Italy, all teachers were, most of the teachers who refused to follow this, unethical educational system and unphilosophical educational system, they were all thrown out. They were all replaced by the kind of the army-based teachers as per the desires of the leaders of this country. And they just picked up those who have accepted, the Mussolini's fascism, those who have accepted and followed German Nazism. They were appointed as teachers. And forcefully, kids were brought down to schools and they were controlled and influenced by the concept of the kind of the nationalism that they wanted to inculcate in their mind. And another, commonality I would suggest is that they started taking as into the household, and they try to, influence the mothers. And there were different organizations to control the household, the parents, into their fold. And through mothers, they wanted to inculcate that kind of education that they wanted to do to the kids. That is the early childhood education. Because the leaders thought that ever since the boy or girl, baby, born in this world, they have to be influenced by only their agenda, their notion, and their concept of nationalism and their concept of idealism. And that is how education was used. And education was highly made a process of the national government, And by that way that education was influenced for a few years. And finally, what happened, that it ended up in fascism, and it was not at all education that the world had witnessed. You and me know the history. I suspect, when I look at this national education policy, there are a lot of similarities. If you look at that, the Ministry of Human Resource Development has been changed into Ministry of Education. That is not a big deal anyway. There is nothing wrong in it also. But this is what Italy, Mussolini did. Ministry of Public Instruction, he changed to Ministry of Education. I don't know why. And the same thing is happening here. Ministry of Human Resource Development is changed into Ministry of Education now. The curriculum is highly centralized. The curriculum is highly centralized. And curriculum framework is in the hands of the central government now. Already it has been there. To some extent, it has the curriculum has been in the higher education has been influenced by the central government through UGC and MHRD and other the agencies like AICTE, Medical Council, and professional agencies. But now, very strongly, the new education policy is trying to, come out with a curriculum framework for the whole country, for 130 crore people. Here to visit all those things. But only thing I would like to tell you now, that the curriculum is the most essential part of education, because it is a framework by which a teacher and learner is going to go through the trajectory of education and achieve the educational goals and the learning outcomes. Because curriculum is like a Bible. It is something like the framework and the formula by which the education is handled in the educational process. And the next thing is subject matters of instruction. The subject matters of instruction, people call it like syllabus, the content, and so on. But I would like to call it as the subject matters of instruction or subject matters of learning. And the curriculum and the subject matters of instruction are the two focal points in the educational process. These are all the documents. These are all the areas where most of the the nationalistic governments wanted to take it in hand. That's what Hitler did. That's what Mussolini did. So now the new national education policy wants us to just go into and listen what it says as curriculum. All 38,000 colleges and 1,000 universities and several lakhs schools are supposed to follow that framework. And that framework is going to be developed none other than the Ministry of Education and its subordinate agencies centralized in Delhi. All the provincial areas, the states, the districts, and the other the regional issues, all would be wiped out from education. And it is going to be one curriculum, one textbook, and one subject matters of instruction, one content, and the oneness is going to be the concept, the focal point of the national education policy. There are a lot of other, steps, the measures they have identified and recommended. And those are all only just a discrete set of action plans. It is just nothing. It is not a policy at all. The national education policy is simply a set of discrete action plans. Almost 90% of it are same. It says that do this, do that, and these are all the regulations. These are all the operational procedures and standards. And these are all not a policy. A policy in the first place should look into the conditions of the country, the conditions and norms and the environment of the society in which the society lives, and the challenges and the problems, the questions, the doubts facing the society, and all have to be received and taken into account. Even you draft the policy for education nationally, if you are. But when you have done it, you haven't taken into the conditions of the society here in this country, the economic conditions, the environmental conditions, the social conditions, the oppressions, the suppressions, the persecutions, ever since the invention of the caste system being inculcated in the Indian structure, social structure, the no education policy had taken into account that social conditions. And majority of the people are denied education, quality education. And just only after independence, constitutionally, people have the right to access education. But before independence, majority, more than 90% of the people have no rights, have it completely, legally, and it was by the religious laws and mandate, they were denied education. Oh, such is the country we are from. And such is the society we are having now. So with this kind of a society, which is very much agrarian nature and segregated like a watertight compartments, like into different caste, creed, religions, and so on, with the linguistic variabilities, and with different walks of life, with cultures and different traditions and different indigenous knowledge systems in this country, across this country. So with all these things, the education policy should be able to be flexible enough to conceive all these variations and diversity. But this national education policy is trying to come up with one curriculum, one textbook, and one regulatory authority, and one mandate, and oneness, everything. And also, it is trying to Sanskritize this country in terms of the new three language formula. And previously, they were fostering Hindi. I don't mind. If anyone wants to learn Hindi, if I also want, I can learn. There is no, Hindi is our language also, one of our brothers' language. Nothing wrong in learning. But the thing is, you should not impose such a language which is already died, the Sanskrit. And you are going to implement in the new education policy, they are going to create universities. They are going to inculcate and come out with some kind of a system and schemes to indirectly influence the education sector to implement the Sanskritization, and to implement the ideals of Sanskrit literatures, the Vedas, and so on. Because if you are asked to learn the language Sanskrit, then the Sanskrit is full of all those Vedas and the spiritual and all those texts, and eventually you have to follow it, you have to read it. That is what I said, the Sanskritization. So coming back to curriculum, the curriculum textbook, there are hundreds of agencies and regulatory authorities they have created. And if you look into the list of the agencies going to on behalf of the central government, going to implement this new education policy in school education. I just visit the National Curriculum Framework for School Education. It is going to be centralized in Delhi, and they are going to form national textbook. And there is something called National Assessment Center. That means that center is going to come out with a framework for conducting examinations. When examination is just simply nothing but evaluation and assessment of the learning outcomes. It is a measure between an activity between the teacher and student and within the campus. And why do we need a central government to come and tell us that this is the way you are going to assess and conduct examination in schools and universities? So there is a center, new body. And there is another body called National Testing Agency. Already they have established it. That National Testing Agency is conducting NEET and other entrance examinations, competitive examinations all around. And that is another big subject where we don't have time here to talk. And at the state level, they are suggesting Department of School Education, Directorate of School Education, and State School Standards Authority. It's a new body. And the SCERT, state level council to establish curriculum, and the district and block level authorities to implement, to oversee, monitor, and implement the national education policy. So right from Delhi to block level, this national education policy is going to control the education policy. If you look at the higher education, there are scores of bodies being recommended and suggested. It is like the Higher Education Commission of India, which is going to be the umbrella body for controlling and monitoring and influencing all higher education sector all around the country, and National Higher Education Regulatory Council, and National Accreditation Council, Higher Education Grants Council, General Education Council. There are scores of other things that I don't want to spell out, but these are all the major bodies. So like the nationalistic governments always try to control the educational process in the past history that we have witnessed, there are scores of different bodies and regulatory regimens have been established and recommended in the national education policy to inculcate, to put into the agenda into action in this country through national education policy. But all those things, why it is happening? I just want to read the vision of this policy document, and I would just like to read only the couple of lines only. Just only 2 lines. The national education policy envisions an education system rooted in Indian ethos that contributes directly and transforming India, that is Bharat. And it goes with a passage. The end of the passage reads like this: the vision of the policy is to instill among the learners a deep-rooted pride in being Indian, not only in thought, but also in spirit, intellect, and deeds, as well as to develop knowledge, skills, values, and dispositions that support responsible commitment to human rights, and so on. It goes like this. So my question here is, this is the vision statement. So the vision says, if you read the keywords, the Indian ethos, education system rooted in Indian ethos, and learners should have a deep-rooted pride in being Indian, not only in thought, but also in spirit, intellect, and deeds. These are worrying statements for me. But the education policy doesn't say what is Indian, who is Indian, what is Indian pride, what is Indian ethos. Is it the ethos of the forefathers who had created this modern India? And I think, is it the ethos that this 3,000 years that the Indian caste system has established? And is it the ethos of the highest social authority who is sitting in the hierarchical social order at the top? Is it the ethos of that community? And what is it? And you and me know, and whose ethos is it going to be? And you and me know whose ethos, whose pride is it going to be? Is it going to be the pride of the whole, all walks of life in this country? My question is. Or is it going to be the pride of, only the socially, specially cultivated community of this country? These are all the questions that the national education policy should, spell out, but it didn't say so. But if you read the other side of the documents throughout, you will know from where they are coming from when it comes to the Indian ethos, the Indian pride, and Indian knowledge. So these are all the worrying issues that are very central in the national education policy. So coming back to the national education policy, there are a lot of ideas. I said that Indian pride and Indian ethos and Indian centric, that we do not know what is that kind of thing. But we know that the way they have spelled out the justifications and the backdrops of this policy, that they are trying to inculcate only and ensure that the oppressors' ideals, the oppressors' ethos, the oppressors' pride are going to be the Indian pride, that everyone else have to be, following that. And the policy talks greatly about liberal education. Too much of liberal education there. I'm not against liberal education. And liberal education means, to them, it is a flexibility simply. That is the narrow definition of the policymakers. And liberal education is not just simply being liberal and flexible and giving opportunity for the students to just go ahead and learn what they expect and what they desire. So it is not just only that. Liberal education means it is to liberate the mindset of the people. The pedagogy, the critical pedagogy, is the pedagogy that go along with liberal education to liberate the mindset, to train the mindset, to question, to reflect on the knowledge and the information that the learner receives in the classroom. He cannot just simply consume it and vomit it in the examination. The learner has to critically think, evaluate the information and knowledge that he receives in the classroom, and he has to reflect with his new ideas. And that is what knowledge is about. The synthesis of knowledge during the learning process must be critically viewed using the critical pedagogy. And the learner must have the opportunity to go around and investigate all round ideals and issues, information, knowledge related to the domains of knowledge that he is addressing or learning. And that is what called liberal education is about. But they call liberal education just to say that you have to have a flexibility to kick out a student if he's not able to, continue his studies. A student is not able to continue his study mainly because of several reasons: the social reasons, social conditions, and economic conditions. A student should not go out of the studies through the educational process just because of these two conditions. That the education policy must consider, must have a solution in it, but it doesn't have. Any solution on this, but rather than it comes out with an idea that a student can just go out anytime in the stages throughout his education process. And for that, they are bringing vocational education as a tool. They are saying that vocational education. The vocational education is a student has to, from the 5th standard onwards, a student has to learn and study vocational, at least one vocation, so that in case if the student is going to go out of the education system and because of various reasons, he will just look after his livelihood with the vocation. What do you mean by education? What do you mean by education? Who you are to come and tell us that, okay, you just learn a vocation, and if you are not able to educate yourself through the education system, you just go and do some business and do some vocation for your livelihood. Education has been reduced like a commodity in this new education policy. This reflects that the secularism, the responsibility of the government is completely lost in the education policy. And the education policy, the right to education The 2009 Act says that until 14 years, you cannot go out. You have to study. You have to complete it. And 2009 Act had come out with a lot of measures to curb the menace, to curb the inadequacies in the inputs. Inputs means the facilities, the built up environment necessary to conduct classes and for the students to learn, the school buildings and basic facilities, and the teachers' qualification. Qualified teachers should be there, and adequate teachers should be there, and all other library facilities and playing ground facilities. All things are considered as input. So the 2009 Education Right Act suggested many measures. You have to have basic all facilities and qualified teachers across the country same. That was the objective of 2009 Act. Now this policy had come out with an intervention saying that you don't have to have equal input, but we are looking for equal output. My question to the policymakers is that without having an equal input, how are you going to have equal output? You must have a standard practice of education, a quality practice of education in all schools, regardless of village schools or urban schools or with different regions. And that standard facilities should be there as a basic input, and qualified teachers should be there. Do we have that now? The government should have come up with a solution for that, to improve the one teacher schools all across the country run by the government. You have to improve, you have to invest, and you have to appoint quality teachers, qualified teachers. There shall not be any discrimination across the schools in the country. All equality in input should be there so that equal output can be achieved. But this policy is coming in the opposite direction. It says that we don't have to have equality in input, but we want equality in output. That is madness. So equality in output, how would they achieve? The new education policy is telling some recommendations, giving some recommendations. The recommendations are, if you don't have schools there, and we would align with some public, private or philanthropic partnership, we would allow the private schools to start. And they say philanthropic. And all schools and private educators in this country, as per the law of this country, as per the constitution of this country, are philanthropic in nature, charitable in nature. Are they philanthropic now? Are they charitable now? It is the highest business in this country now. They are all billionaires now, who came as paupers and established a small, in a small facility, the schools or colleges and higher education institutions, and now they are emperors, billionaires, and it is a highly profit-making body now. And you are now going to promote private education along with, you are saying that the government is going to align with philanthropists, I mean the private stakeholders and the promoters of education, and they are going to align with them and ask them to start schools where there are no schools. Is it not laughable? Then why do we need a government then? Why do we need a government then? If you are going to ask the private people to start educational institutions in this country at school levels and higher education. And they are also having another solution, that there are champions in the regions, the champions, the social workers, and they will be observed as teachers also to fulfill the gap. If there are no teachers in schools, then they are going to bring, and even if there are teachers, they are going to bring the social workers to teach the students. The 2009 Right to Education Act says that only a qualified, certified, quality, teachers, as prescribed by the government of India, should only be appointed as teachers. Whereas this policy says that any rascals and rowdies going on the street can be brought down to the school and he can be made teachers. Who are that social workers? Are they going to be, all walks of life, drawn from all walks of life, from all communities and caste and creed? So these are the means of liberal education of this so-called national education policy. They want liberal education just to inculcate and implement their schemes. And they want to have, as I said before, the vocational education. Vocational education must be, like the kind of education as a choice of student, isn't it? If I want to be a fitter, a welder, a turner, it must be my choice, my choice. It should not be an accident for the learner. So in Germany, the vocational education is on the rise, and it is highly addressed, very professionally, educationally. By all means, it is well addressed in Germany. But in Germany, if a student chooses vocational stream education, it is his interest. It is his choice. It is not the choice of the government. And now this national education policy comes and tell me, hey, come on, you must do vocational education. What sort of vocation I would have in my village there back home? Are they going to send some vocational expert from Chennai, the metro city, where there may be many experts there, to send to my village 300 kilometers away to come and teach my kids the vocation? And my children are going to learn artificial intelligence, and my children are going to learn machine learning, which are going to be vocation also in the near future. Without those skills, no one can work in the work environment in the future. Or my children are going to learn the exposed to cyber physical systems, which is going to govern the whole world in the next generation? Certainly not. And my children are going to learn what my forefathers have learned as vocation. Then is it not going to be a caste-based vocation then? Is it not a descent-based vocation? A descent-based vocation. It is a traditional then. So if there is a vocational education, the vocational education should be able to give an opportunity to the learner, to the graduates or the students, an opportunity to come across, go across the border and learn new adventures, new avenues, new vocations, suitable to the emerging trend, emerging economy. That means, that is what I call intergenerational occupational mobility. The right vocational education means it must facilitate intergenerational occupational mobility from one occupation to another. My forefather had an occupation. It was not his choice because he born into that caste, the low caste. And because of that, he was forced to follow some vocation. And this new education policy is asking us now to go and do what our forefathers have been doing there. And the vocation will offer me an opportunity to go and do the priestly work in temple? Will it offer me? It is also an vocation. It is a vocation. It is a job now. And the new education policy should allow intergenerational occupational mobility. Otherwise, this vocation education is going to inculcate and again bring back the descent-based work culture in the society. And the curriculum has been defined in that way. In addition to liberal education, it is a complete plot. It is a complete plot to define the society the way by the aspiration of the government, by the policymakers, by the rulers, by the specially cultivated highest socially authority of this country. And the recent addition is the new neoliberal, market forces have joined. They are telling us this is the curriculum, this is the knowledge, and this is the skill that we want. I mean the corporate bodies, the business sectors. And they are again looting the education system now. And the new national education policy has, allowed the neoliberal market forces to penetrate into education system. And for all of us, I think that we all know that in 2005, the government of India had offered higher education to the World Trade Organization. And what it says, the World Trade Organization has a mandate to privatize education all around the world. The World Trade Organization has, instructed all governments who have subscribed to World Trade Organization, the GATS agreement, the GATS agreement. Whoever the countries have subscribed to the GATS agreement have to agree that education is a trade. It is the first condition. The second condition is the governance, the state should not interfere into education. It should be led into the private hands. Even the fees for the students should be prescribed by the private bodies, private educators, not by the government. These are the three major conditions. And India had subscribed to that GATS agreement in the year 2005. And it was not implemented until 2014. And now this new national education policy has succumbed and subscribed to implement all conditions that they have signed with WTO GATS. So now it is completely a private affair now. Almost 70% of the colleges in India are private sector, private bodies, and just only 30% government. And again, these 30% on phased manner are going to be corporatized. Corporatization means they have to live on their own. There will be no subsidy. There will be no funding support from the government. Very clearly stated in the national education policy. Even IIMs, IITs were asked to generate their own income. How? Through fees. Who is going to afford? Who can afford that kind of fees? 97% of the people of this country cannot afford to go for that kind of a fees. So similarly in school education. So that means in all manner, education has been made through the national education policy as a commodity. It has been converted into trade. The national education policy had come out with, I told you, a regimentary, regulatory system. And it is nothing but to implement education as a trade. And the national education policy is slowly, enabling the government, the state, to relieve itself from the responsibility of education and allow in place the private bodies to occupy. Honestly, after 10 years, you will see, you and me will witness that this is going to be a great disaster in this country. If you allow the economic sector, the trade, and any other sectors to be spoiled by policies and by legislations, regulations, and constitutional mandates and things, even if it is spoiled, it is not going to affect the humanity in a major way. But if education is spoiled, and if education is misled in the hands of only few, for the interest of the few, against the interest of the majority, then it is going to be a havoc. It's going to be heading towards a social war. A social war is ahead if this new education policy is implemented. I'm not, against the policymakers. I'm not against the state. But one thing I would like to commit here, that they must be very, very much careful if they start implementing this national education policy now. Even if they want to take it back, it would be too dangerous and difficult to take back. They must think 1,000 times. And the people of this country should think 1,000 times and debate over it, discuss all aspects and all issues laid out there. And just only take the collective reasoning, and implement what is good for this country and what is good for the society. The structure that they have proposed, the structure 5+3+3+4 for school education, and 3 types of higher educational institutions. One is research intense universities, the large scale universities, and the teaching intense universities. That is the second category. And the third category is, autonomous degree offering institutions, colleges. These are the 3 denominations of the categories of educational institutions, higher education. If you look at this structure, what is the need to change this structure? 10+2 was the original structure. And most of the countries in the world are following 10+2 only, most of the countries. And it is working well for all. And why they have come down and segregated 5+3 at the beginning? They wanted to inculcate, indoctrinate. They wanted to indoctrinate at the age of 3, with their ideals, with their Indian pride, with their Indian centric knowledge, with their Indian ethos, so that the child, once it grows, it is not going to listen even the parents and society and the conditions in which it lives. It is going to listen the masters who are going to inculcate them, indoctrinate them with their ideals. That is the only reason. Because the policy document itself says that from the age of 3 to 8, the brain grows very fast. And the absorption capacity, the cognitive capacity is rapidly growing in this stage. During this stage, if you inculcate what the ideals that you want, then it is going to fast implant into the brain. And accordingly, the cultural system will be developed based on the newborn babies. And over a period of time, then the whole nation will fall in line with the kind of the nationalism that the policymakers want to create. I think that this is the kind of the education system that they are going to inculcate now, implement now. And we have to now question whether it satisfies the conditions of the society and the country. Because one thing I would tell you, that what education means. Education is just simply nothing but a kind of a social function where the students are given the opportunity, a wider opportunity to study all relevant borderless knowledge domains through critical thought process. And as a result, through the learned process, they are going to reflect with what they have learned, with their ideas and knowledge. So that means knowledge is exposed and new knowledge is reflected through the critical process, thought process. And that reflection is the critical component of the learning process. Nowhere in the national education policy that critical learning process has been spelled out. Nowhere. That's what I said, that critical pedagogy is very much important. The students in this country are highly oppressed. They have no freedom. They are just learning what they are told. They have to vomit in the examinations what they were given. And it is a mechanistic approach. It is not an organic teacher. There is a student. And that learning process takes between them only. And within the context of the environment, within the context of the social structure, of the social problems. And the curriculum should be able to cultivate and consume the likes, the dislikes, the challenges, the questions and doubts and problems facing the society, not just one society, all societies of the country. So that the learner will have a reference, a relevance to the conditions, to the social problems, to the challenges facing the society with respect to the domain he learns, so that there will be a relativity between the subject knowledge that he learns and their relevance to the society to which he is going to apply, going to dispose after graduation. So that is what education is about. So in this country, I never ever, even today, the existing education system, even in the past, we never had any education system in the history of India in the recent times, in recent 2000 years. We never had an education system that addresses the conditions of the society and the challenges and the questions and the doubts and the problems being facing the society. So that means at least this is an opportunity now. If you want to have an education policy system, that policy and system should reflect the society. It should take into account the society, the social conditions. Our social conditions, there are about 600,000, 6,000 plus caste and different traditions and culture. And these castes are hierarchically placed, the ups and downs, and with the privileged and underprivileged, advantaged and disadvantaged. So that means that knowledge is the central point of education. When knowledge is the central point, the focus of education, and whose knowledge the student should learn, the knowledge comes from the human experience, the self-consciousness. After having the sense of human experience, with human experience, there is a self-consciousness, and through that self-consciousness, through the process of actualization of reasoning, and the truth is found. That truth is called knowledge. And that knowledge should be handled in the educational process. The curriculum, the textbooks, the subject matters, all should support this. And there shall not be any barrier and breaks for consuming and cultivating the subject matters of instruction from surrounding. And it must be regional. It must have relevance. All those things should be there in the education process. In the name of nationalism, or in the name of controlling the society, if the nation state, I mean the rulers of this country, joining hands with the neoliberal market forces and the specially cultivated class of the society, inculcate its own formations and conditions and formulations, it cannot be education. Already the society is undemocratic. The society is divided, it is segregated into watertight compartments. There is no communication. A democratic society, according to John Dewey, should have a conjoint communicative experience, a conjoint communicative experience. A democratic society is a kind of an associated living. Are we living in an associative fashion? This caste, that caste, but still the enmity is growing. One caste is seeing the other as opponent, enemy. And that rift and the division is deeply penetrating day by day. There is virtually no communication. And John Dewey says that that communication, the conjoint communicative experience among the different social sectors, different social groups, and different people of the society is very, very important for education to do its intended business. Because that becomes the source for creating subject matters of instruction. That conjoint communicative experience, as I told you, between different social groups is very much essential for us to create knowledge, because that experience is going to be fed into the educational process as subject matters of instruction. And that subject matters of instruction will be thoroughly reviewed, studied, reflected, researched, and the new knowledge will come. And that new knowledge is going to give us a prosperous time for all our walks of life, to everybody in the society. It will give economy. It will give livelihood. It will give job. It will give all skills and knowledge to execute the social dispositions in the society and professional dispositions at workplace. That is the true educational process. You please take these passages, what I said now, and just to see anywhere in this national education policy, whether the national education policy had addressed this question. If at all there is an education policy, the first thing the education policy should do is to try to annihilate the caste system. Annihilate the caste system, because the caste system in the country is the major obstacle for knowledge evolution, for the knowledge creation. Ever since the caste system was inculcated, implemented in this country in the 1,500 years of the history, there was no breakthrough knowledge evolution and discoveries in this country. Whatever the discoveries and knowledge we created, all were just 2,500 years ago. Those traditions are, even the knowledge are lost in many ways. But ever since we started following the caste system, there was no conjoint communicative experience among the people. Diversity is very important for us to come with the new knowledge. The oneness will destroy knowledge. One content, one system, one curriculum, one textbook will destroy knowledge. A learner should be exposed to different walks of knowledge, a diverse knowledge systems. Right or wrong, that is a different issue. And the education will pave the way for the learner to just learn and come out with the rightness, to identify the right, the reasoning process. The reasoning must be inculcated in the learning process so that the student will be able to understand, the teacher will be able to facilitate, the student will be able to find the truth. And that is the knowledge. Since we do not have a conjoint communicative experience, whatever the experience I have as a X caste, whatever the experience somebody has the Y caste, whatever the experience somebody has a Z caste, and those experience and knowledge and precious knowledge resided there in the caste only and limited within the boundary of the caste. And there was no intercourse of knowledge between different castes because of lack of communication, because lack of associated living, because lack of cohesion in addressing the challenges facing the society in 21st century. That means the conjoint communicative experience and associated living are the norms of the democratic society. When that democratic society is very much not there in this country, what the society has failed to do should be done by the education. Education can be used as a tool to destroy caste system. I honestly, I tell you, it is not just proudly I'm saying, but I'm scientifically, I'm defending, I can justify in different forum that education can be used as a tool to destroy the caste system in this country. The reason is, it is not just to improve all people to be wise through education. It is the way that the education process, the curriculum should be able to collectively cultivate and consume all human experiences in this country, all challenges facing the humankind in this country. And those will be, used as subject matters of instruction in the curriculum. And those things will be, subject matters of instruction will be dealt in the classroom through the learning process critically using the relevant knowledge systems and science and other maths and other knowledge systems we have established since past in the world. And that will give us an opportunity to come up with solutions and to find the truth. And those truths are going to generate more and more knowledge. More and more knowledge creation means more and more economic opportunities, economic activities. If a society is facing a solution, is a problem, and with that experience, reflecting that experience, if you come out with the new knowledge and truth, and that truth must be implemented, and that knowledge must be implemented to address the solution. That means that is an economic opportunity then, partially. It will be translated into an economic opportunity, and that will give the livelihood, that will give the job opportunities. It is not the corporate companies who are going to give few thousand jobs every year. That is not the knowledge that should do. The knowledge should make man as man, human as human first. And the knowledge should enable the humankind to resolve the problems, all impediments that the society is facing in this country. So that as a result, there is a truth, there is a knowledge, there is a discovery, there is a patent. All will be just used back in the society to transform the society. In the transformation, as a part of the economic activity, all this knowledge will be translated into economic activity, and every walk of this country, every human being will have an opportunity to have his or her own livelihood. There will be no poverty. The class disparity, the rich and poor will be demolished. The superior caste and the so-called depressed community, the disparity will be demolished through by creating equality in knowledge system. That means the depressed communities, all walks of disadvantaged communities, knowledge, their indigenous knowledge, their experience, all should be translated into subject matters of instruction. And that should be handled scientifically in the classroom. And if you do that, the government doesn't have to feed food and subsidies to the people, because people will take care of themselves. That kind of education is what we need in this country. And these are the conditions in which we live. I would say that the policymakers are ashamed of themselves by not addressing the core issue. Without addressing this core issue, how are you going to solve the problems? You're saying employability. Employability is just only for the corporate bodies. The corporate bodies are telling that this is the knowledge, this is the skill I want. It is very narrow. It is like making machines. It is like making humans as machines. For them, like a robot, for them to go and work in the corporate bodies. That is not education. And the country is talking much about employability. And the employability is defined by the neoliberal market force. It is not defined by the society. That is what I say, a society-driven education is the answer to the education policy of this country. Society-driven education. Because, as I said before, education is fundamentally a social function, and education should consume and interface. At the interface of the society, education should be able to consume and cultivate the challenges, the questions, and the problems being faced by the society, and translate them into subject matters of instruction. And that subject matters of instruction, once it dealt through learning process and research process, they're all going to come up with a new knowledge. And this new knowledge is going to feed our kids, and it is going to generate wealth for this country, and it is going to help the nation building, and it is going to after all walks of life, all social groups, regardless of the caste and creed. And that is not there. And if you want to do that, it is the society-driven education. I just want to read one passage from my book that as a solution that I said, what is society-driven education? That this country should follow. At least, I just read the passage, just only one passage, bear with me. At the least, the formal education should be able to instantaneously conceive the unsegregated human experiences and problems or questions or causes of knowledge that the society brings with it, and translate them into subject matters of studies, and simultaneously expose them to the students. And while doing so, it should enable the learners to critically reason out and subsequently stimulate them to reflect on those subject matters or questions or ideas and knowledge that they confront with through a suitable thought process, so that they will be able to conceive and or produce knowledge and relate or translate them back to the society where from the basic fabrics of that particular knowledge emerged. It is a small passage, but it has thousands of pages descriptions. If you are going to translate this passage into curriculum, textbooks, and other functions of education, including examination and so on, there are thousands of pages there to describe, to expand this passage. This is the solution that this country needs. Education should not be, now the education is mandated, is decided and controlled by three major forces. The first force is nation state, ruled by the rulers. And the second is, as usual, the specially cultivated community with a special advantage, with all social authority and power, the upper caste. And the third is the neoliberal market forces. These are the three enemies to education process in this country. Now, all these three have now joined and formulated a policy document called National Education Policy 2020. And this policy is now trying to, entrust or enslave or influence 130 crore people of this country, no exception. And this policy is not addressing the basic functions of education, and it is not addressing the needs of this country, and it is not specifically addressing the society, the social structure and the social conditions of this country. So that means it is irrelevant. It is a set of the practices being followed all around the world, which is irrelevant to this country. So that means that the education policy should be redefined, and in its present form, it must be rejected, resisted by all people of this country, no exceptions. Even the specially cultivated community who enjoys the power, social power now, I also tell them that your kids also will be affected by this education process, because this education policy is trying to enslave the learners, enslave the learners. It is going to oppress the students. That means the students' wisdom and their borderless thought process are curtailed and reduced in this education process as enforced by the national education policy. By that way, those who are enjoying the highest social authority in this country, their children are going to be affected, and they are going to be mechanized and machinized like a robo. Please, I appeal to all people of this country to seriously study. If you feel that I am wrong, you please discuss with me. I'm prepared to debate, discuss, and answer all questions. And like me, there may be many people. And we have to debate. If I am wrong, I will learn from you. But you must think now, 1,000 times before accepting this national education policy. And if this policy, if you find it is wrong, you must, align to reject it once for all. And we create a policy that is society driven and based on the society driven education philosophy. And education should be brought down from the enslavement of these three colluded, forces back to the society and put forth at the center, the centrality of the society, so that it is going to reclaim, transform the society and build the new nation where prosperity will be achieved and equality will be, and fraternity and all those democratic norms and values of the society will be restored. Then only we can call that education has done its role. As of now, education is enslaved. Education is also, under the clutches of these forces, not able to deliver its objectives. So if we want education to do its intended work, then education should be freed from these forces, the three forces I mentioned, and it should be brought back to the society in the hands of the majority society. Education should be allowed to do its function so that it will achieve its objectives. With this, there are so many things that I can discuss, but there is with limited time. I think that we may have a question and answer times where if the other areas which I did not address, I can answer the question. And I really take pride in addressing this August gathering, and this is a wonderful opportunity. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share my ideas and viewpoints. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Jawahar Mason. We have a couple of questions on the chat section. So, yeah, so we will, I think, take up those questions first. The first question that was posted, when NEP 2020 is that, when is NEP 2020 at implementation stage, and what is the future course of action? We do not have a name there, so there's no name. And this is the question. So could you please throw light on this?
So, okay. So the question is, when is it going to be implemented?
Correct.
That is the question. Say,
Yes.
actually, the NEP was drafted completed in 2019 after 2-3 years period, and concluded in 2019 and submitted to the government of India. And in 2020, it was revised as a concise abstract format and recently released in 2020 as 66 pages. And the cabinet has endorsed it now. And now already the implementation process has started without any discussions and debates. And even without a debate and endorsement widely in the parliament, and the government had already started implementing it. There are the prime minister and the president and the governors of all states have been aligned, and they have been instructed to implement it. All vice chancellors were instructed to implement it in higher education sector, because it is easy to implement in higher education sector, so that much resistance will be reduced before going to the school education. Because school education, predominantly 85% of the schools are coming under state boards, state governments, where it is they have to go along with the state also, even though they are going to go ahead regardless of the state's likes or not. But it is easy. All higher education institutions are under the control of UGC, so it is easy for them to implement. So now they have instructed all vice chancellors, all state governments, and all governors also to follow to implement it. Already the process has started, and they are in the preparation of creating all the regulatory authorities, as I discussed, I mentioned in my speech, and so all are there, and the detailed implementation plan also have been developed, and already the stage has been set, and many states, there are, I don't want to quote those states because it might be considered as a political thing, and those states have already committed to implement it, already committed, they have started, the education ministers have started to implement it, couple of states already, and many other states are preparing to implement it. Only a couple of states are just for namesake resisting, but that will be ruled out. I think from the next academic year, and this is 2021, and already some states have started implementing from 2021, and the government, central government is aiming to implement next year onwards. But the preparations are already underway. Vice chancellors have been instructed.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for answering that. Let's move on to the second question. The second question we have is from Mr. Anu Mohan. The question says, I do have a doubt whether our country's upper class, like corporates, politicians, higher bureaucrats, children, etc., will go ahead with the public school system under NEP 2020 instead of ICSE and CBSE schools. I believe Anu Mohan wants to get to know your view on this.
Right. So the question is whether the elite communities will go to public schools or not.
Yes, that's correct, sir. Yes.
See, already majority of the elite community, the rich or whatever the privileged communities, the majority, according to statistics, I don't know exactly, but I know I read somewhere that majority of their kids are going to already private schools. And the public schools now, or if national education policy is implemented, the public schools will be, most of the public schools in rural areas, small schools will facing closure because of a lack of admissions. The lack of admission is because of the trend that the private bodies, the private educators have said that private education is better and public education is lower. But I tell you, my friends, it is not true. I'm quoting from the research done by the foreign agencies. I'm not quoting the Indian government research. It's a true educational body. It's a famous body under the United Nations. They studied the private education in India, and they concluded that the numeracy and literacy skills are far good in public education than in private education. Say, for instance, even the government of India report says a student of 10th standard has only knowledge of the third standard. A student of 5th standard has only knowledge of second standard student. So that means the numeracy and literacy skills are very much low. It is written by only National Education Policy draft. If you read the last year's draft, they themselves have quoted. But these numeracy and literacy skills at school levels are very much low in private education as opposed to public education, because in public education, especially in progressive states like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, and many other progressive states, and if you compare the public education and private schools and public schools, the public school students are having the knowledge outcome higher than the private schools. But in states like Bihar, where the public education is a little bit not doing well, then the private education, the educators have a little edge over them. But it doesn't mean that public education is low. Public education is always good, but it has to be improved because it doesn't have, as I said, the public education system, the schools do not have input. They have no playgrounds, they have no toilets, they have no classrooms, they have no teachers. If you have all students will come to public education. Say, that means the trend, but that is the fact. But the new education policy undermines all these things. it wants to privatize more schoolings with private players. So that means even in villages, the government schools are going to be replaced by the private schools. And that is what naturally, practically, it is what going to happen. Even the policy states that it is going to align with the private philanthropists to do education in rural areas. And they call, one system called a special education zones for the disadvantaged communities, concentrated area. So in those areas, they are going to declare special education zones. And in those zones, they want to create more schools. Those schools are going to be created by private only, not by the government. And so if so, then who is going to get admitted their kids into the public schools? So already the trend is that the elite community is depending on the private, and more, looking at the trend, even the depressed communities and the poverty-ridden people are also trying to take their kids to only the private schools because they believe that private schools are doing better, whereas truly it is not. But that trend should be demolished, and we have to expose the truth, and government should take the initiatives to promote public education so that more people will join public education. If the new education policy comes out with the concrete idea to promote public education, even the elite people will come and join. But the government is promoting private, so more and more elite people will join, 100% all will join private education only, and more private schools will emerge in future. Already 40% of the private schools are 40% of the schools are private in India, and 60% are going to be now reduced in the future. In another 20 years, more than 70% of the schools in this country are going to be private.
Thank you, sir, for shedding light on that question. We have another question. Actually, we have two questions, and both the questions are on similar lines. So I'm going to combine both the questions. And the people who have posted these questions are T. Suna from Odisha and Sania from Jharsuguda. We also have E.R. Satyaprakash and Mr. Sunil Nanda. The question now: how to prevent this NEP from execution, and how to protest implementation of these policies? So this is the question.
The question is leading towards a solution now. So what is the solution? The solution is prevent NEP and how to protest against it. I just want to quote my brothers and sisters who asked this question. In America, in United States, abortion, the women pregnancy abortion. If a government wants to implement, whether by legislation and laws, whether abolition is wanted or not, that is discussed for years together. They discuss and debate. They just don't leave, okay, abortion means what? It's very simple. It's a nothing. It's not going to affect me. So it is not a big deal. This is the kind of the mindset the Indian people have. Whereas in United States, just one issue, very small issue, abortion. Whether it should be, abortion should be mandated by law or not, whether we want abortion or not. If government wants to implement a policy on it, and all walks of life, all people debate in TVs, in media, in conferences, in seminars, and a lot of deliberations takes place. And the debates trigger around the world in that country. And the governance, the people, the policymakers who take the decision, who are going to take these debates and reflect. And accordingly, legislations, laws are made. See, for abortion, one simple, small problem that create a debate like that. Basically, the Indian society is argumentative society. We argue and demand for everything, for rights and this and that. But we are all coerced by the forces, by the policymakers, by the political parties. And there are many neoliberal market forces and corporate bodies have say in all policy matters. And And accordingly, the government reflects. Because we are not debating, the pros and cons of the policies, whether it is environmental policy, whether it is a policy on Kashmir, or whether it is a policy on whatever it is. All policies should be debated scientifically. There must be a freedom to debate it, and the Constitution gives the opportunity to debate it. And no one can curtail that debate as long as it is within the scientific purview. It is rational. Okay? So when for a small abortion matter, when there is such a huge debate going on, this country for the past 4 years, they started creating the policy, and it was consulted in the early part of 2019 and finalized in 2019. Now they have endorsed, the government had endorsed the policy, but there is no debate. Only you and me are talking, few people only. So this message should be taken down to the grassroots, because majority of the people in this country are blindfolded. That is what I say. What do you mean by nationalism? Nationalism means nothing but, inculcating the desires of the nation state. Nation state means what? It is the ruler of the state and the privileged segment of the society together. And they define what is nation state. They define what is nationalism. They define what is the national aspiration. And they define what is patriotism. And they inculcate all those things on majority people. That is what called nationalism means. And that means that nationalism is implemented through two processes. One is, it is a formation of the mind, and then making you to practice it. These are the two-folded things. First, through social means, they come and interfere your mind, and they say that this is nationalism, this is our nation, this is our, jingoism and our loyalty and all those things, our Indian race, this, that, all they say. And with those beautiful words, they try to form your mindset. That is formation of mind. They form your mind. And majority people, ignorant people, they fall in line. And then it becomes a habituation. It is habituated over a time. So habit forming. First mind forming, then habit forming. Once you take it as a habit, then you show that, yes, I am an Indian, I'm loyal to my nation and this, that, all those things, without knowing what is nationalism, without knowing how it affects you and your life. So that means by that way, the nation states and the people who are at the power and the social power and political power and economic power, they all join hands and try to mesmerize this country. And in this process, we lost our wisdom, we lost our debate and thought process. And that should be the first thing. So that means when they are coming down to the grassroots level to form the mind, to habituate the practice, why not you and me go to the people, the same people, grassroots level, to form their mind, to let them habituate on what is national education policy, what is the pros and cons of it, what is rights and wrongs, so that they will react to it. And that must happen. That is the way you can, if you want to prevent it, this is the only way. See, enable people to understand what are the pros and cons of it, and what are the merits and demerits, in what way it is going to be relevant to us or not, in what way it is going to be beneficial to the whole society or not. And you just tell them, expose them the truth, and join hands with them so that they would reflect. And by that is the only means now, because with the highest power and forces in hands, the nation state, the economic power, the social power, the highest authority, social authority, all these people are very, very strong now. And they will easily, decimate your resistance unless all people of this country are aware of what is this truth, and they must be aligned. The debate should go around at grassroots level. The students should go, professors should go and talk and debate, and all activists and all social elements should go and discuss with the people and let people aware of it. This is the only way we can resist and prevent the policy.
Thank you, sir. That was a fantastic analysis. I mean, that was a very thought-provoking one. I believe the question has been answered. Is it okay to take 2 or 3 more questions from the audience?
Any tough questions or any critical questions, you please, I'm welcome.
Thank you, sir. Right now, we do not have any other questions on the chat box. However, I would like to keep the forum open for the audience, for the participants to raise questions directly by raising your hands maybe, so that we can unmute you. Participants, do you have any questions at all? Dr. Jawahar Nason is ready to address your questions. Yes, Mr. Suraj Bhan, is there a question? Would you like to pose a question now? Do you want us to unmute you?
Rakesh,
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
please unmute Suraj Ban.
Yeah, sure.
Suraj Ban, first of all, you introduce yourself. Where you are from? Suraj Ban?
I think I think the question is there on the chat box. Yeah, so he is asking, can anybody oppose this policy or any correction step by the government could be taken? I believe the question has been answered, but still, nevertheless, I want Dr. Nason to comment on this.
Yeah, so I think as you said that it has been answered, but that is the fundamental right given to the citizen of this country. The fundamental right given to the citizens of this country is that to oppose, reflect our voice against or in favor of the policy. So it is a basic fundamental constitutional rights given to any individual in this country. So there is no problem and we have to voice for it. Even if you accept it, you say that, yes, it is fine, I accept it. If you don't accept it, you just say it is not. But one thing we have to make a difference between the policy and legislations and laws. A policy cannot become a law. A policy is only a policy. Only when it is mandated through legislation, it becomes a law, and only then it becomes a mandate. So that means a law is a compulsory to implement. Before a policy becomes law, a policy is translated into law. A policy is a policy, only a document. It cannot be just with the executive authorities. It cannot be straight away implemented. It cannot. Whereas the government already started implementing it. And it has a detailed plan for the next 10 years, the first phase, and then afterwards, the next phase. So that means a policy is just a policy. It is not a plan, and it is not a law that the country should do it. As long as it remains as a policy, we have to oppose it. We can oppose it if we want it. We don't have to oppose it if it is right. If it is wrong, we can oppose it because it is a policy. Only the law you cannot oppose it, because once it is endorsed in the parliament and enacted as a law, the law cannot be disputed by a common man, but it can be debated and disputed in the parliament to amend it or change it through the people's mandate. But as far as it is a policy, it is not a law, you can oppose it, please.
There is one last question we can take up, sir. So Mr. Rakesh has posted this question. He wants to know if reservations and scholarships are also available through this national education policy.
Not at all. That is my first answer. I explain now how it is. There is no say in the throughout 66-page document, and even before that, the draft document 400 and plus pages, there was no saying anywhere in the whole document reservation and scholarships, nothing. And with that, we know what it is. But Now I explain how is it going to be dissipated. See, this policy is fostering towards 100% privatization in the long run. Towards 100% privatization in the long run. In the next 20 to 30 years, if this policy is implemented, there will be hardly few government institutions. Even that government institutions like IIM, IITs, all are going to be corporatized. Even though they are government, they are going to be corporatized. Corporatized means self-governance and self-finance management. That means they have to generate their own finance in the long run. All, including Anna University in Tamil Nadu, the famous universities, which is offering to millions of students at least affordable education, with less fee and all those things are going to be vanished because of the corporatization enforced by this policy. So that means either there are two facets. One is there will be no new or a rapid growth of public institutions. There will be no rapid growth of public institutions. Like during Kamaraj, when he was a chief minister, he created thousands of schools in Tamil Nadu. Likewise, many state governments have created a lot of schools those days. And that rapid formation of schools are not going to happen. And rapid formation of public institutions, public universities are not going to happen. But rapidly, private educators are going to start schools and going to start universities and colleges. And already it is more than half, and the rest of the half, they are going to occupy in the near future. And the existing public institutions are going to be corporatized by universities. The public universities are going to be corporatized because they have to find self-finance and they cannot rely on the government funding source. So in that way, after 10 years, even though they are public institutions, they are going to be private institutions. So when they are going to be private institutions, when they are going to make a decision on admissions, when they are forced to find their own fund for running the universities and institutions, and they are going to rely on fees only, where will be the reservation? Where will be the reservation? The reservation will be reduced to a couple of public institutions only in the long run. And most of the institutions, the top high tier, the tier 1 institutions like IITs, they are going to be corporatized where you cannot study and you have to pay more in the future after 10 years. And there are some state public universities where they are also corporatized, where you will have just a namesake. In some few universities, you will have reservations because it's a constitutional mandate. But 90% of the institutions are going to be privatized in the long run. And after 15 years, I think that if this is implemented in full swing, after 15 years, the reservation will be made meaningless. Reservation will be made, even though it will be there in the constitution. They're not going to change the constitution that there will be no reservation. But there will be reservation in the constitution, but there will be no place where you can implement reservation. You will not have universities and schools to implement reservation because all are going to be privatized. And especially World Trade Organization is joining hands strongly with these governments, like governments of India. And their mandate is to allow the private sector to function education and to set the fees. So in that way, the fees are going to be high. Majority people are going to be deprived of in the private education as well. So the government doesn't have any subsidies and one of those things in World Trade Organization got the condition very clearly stated: the government cannot subsidize education. That is a word. You go and read it in God's agreement. The God says the government cannot subsidize the education sector. That means there shall be no scholarship. There shall be no support, financial support for students and other in-kind supports. And all will be phase-wise manner, all will be relieved. Because if the government says that we are not going to do that, let the government first go and withdraw its offer from World Trade Organization GATS. From the GATS, the government should first withdraw its offer. Then we will believe, yes, they will try to subsidize or they will continue scholarships and funding supports for students and educational institutions. Forget the funding support to students. The government is planning to stop funding to schools, government schools, stop funding to government universities. Even the universities are not going to have a lot of funding support. Then how are we going to give scholarship to students? So even though reservation will be there in constitution, there will be no institutions, no means very little institutions will be available for implementing reservation. That means majority of the institutions there will be no reservations, and the funding support is going to be stopped based on the GATS agreement, and there will be no scholarships after 15 years, 10 years. This is what going to happen.
Thank you, sir, for making things crystal clear.
Thank you.
Although I did say that that was the last question, however, I feel a compulsion to take another question which seems to be a little important, which cannot be ignored. Do I have your permission? One last question.
Please, madam.
Yes. So the question has been raised by Anu Mohan, and we also have a similar question by Mr. Bansilal Chaudhary. So the question is about the conflict between NEP 2020 and RTE 2009. To be very precise, let me read out the question. So we have Ms. Anu Mohan, who says, as far as her readings are concerned, RTE 2009 should be amended, then only NEP will stand. Is that right?
Yes, it is right, madam. It is right. And the government is in the draft policy. In the draft policy, the NEP says that they were going to amend it. If you look at that 484 pages draft policy, which is the detailed policy, now it is 66 pages abstract only. So this abstract should be extended into the detailed version. The detailed version says that they are going to amend the 2009 Act. And that's where I said that in 2009, the areas where they are going to amend is the areas of the input. Because I have to tell you, this audience, the reason to amend it, there are two reasons. One is the government wants to penetrate through the private bodies and private social workers into educational system. And in the name of tutors, special tutors, champions, local champions, all those names very fashionably they have laid out. And through them, they want to enter into the education sector to influence in whatever they have some agenda. And the other thing is they want to allow all people, those who have some interest in education, but they have a hidden agenda to inculcate their whatever that their suffraganization, whatever the other hidden things that they have, they want to have schools. And for them, they may not have much money to, but in that case, even a small room can be allowed as a school. They can have a school, a small room, and they call it as a school, and they will teach something else besides the curriculum. That we all know that what is that something else. They may have some spiritual agenda, religious agenda, and the Hindutva agenda, and many other agenda they may have, and they want a place through education. They want to bring it. For them, they want to start schools. So these are the two areas. So the inputs, parameters, like the basic facilities, the fundamental facilities, and qualified staff are the two major areas of the 2009 RTE Act. And if these two are removed, the qualified staff are removed, and the basic inputs as mandated in the RTE 2009 are removed, then they will have the freedom to start the schools as they like. A one-man, a small one-room school, and they will teach as they like, and they will bring all social workers of their as futures they like, and they would come and teach. So these are the two major things that they want to amend in the 2009 Act, so that they can have alternate school system. That is what it is said in this new education policy. The new education policy says alternate schooling. Why do you need alternate schooling when you have a mainstream regular schooling? Why do you want alternate schooling? The alternate schooling is to perpetrate their own agenda. They want to put their agenda through the education system. They want to have more schools like that. so that they can put their agenda, their spirituality, their Hindutva, or whatever it is. So because of that, they want to amend 2009 Act so that they would do that. And with the majority, thumping majority in the parliament, they will do that.
Thank you so much, sir, for answering that. I have no words, actually. I'm running out of words to express my gratitude for, to you for having been so patiently explaining so much about the NEP. And it was not just restricted to NEP alone. It was also, a holistic education that you provided us through this beautiful deliberation of yours. Thank you, Dr. Jawahar Mason, for exhibiting such grace in sharing knowledge that may actually have taken a lifetime to learn if one were to try by oneself. The past 1.5 hours or so has been an hour of scholarly enlightenment for the audience. Your thematic address has raised a whole array of thought-provoking and valid questions. You actually had the audience, on the chat section, if you see, you had the audience very much involved. We thank you for that. Thank you once again, Dr. Jawahar Mason.
Thank you, Professor
Mr.
Ponsalvi.
Kadam is there. Shall we?
Yeah, of course. We
Mr.
move on.
Kadam is there. Okay.
The roots of all goodness, or let's say the root of all good things, lie in the soil of appreciation for such goodness, says the Dalai Lama. I request Mr. Jitendra Kadam to propose the vote of thanks. Over to you, Mr. Kadam. Mr. Kadam, are you there? Okay, in the meantime, I would like to give a small introduction, a brief introduction about Mr. Jitendra Kadam. In the meantime, I hope he joins us. Mr. Jitendra Kadam, an engineer by profession, is a member of Baba Saheb Ambedkar National Association of Engineers, which is an important association founded by his father. He is a Kanshiram and Buddhist ideology enthusiast. Has he joined yet? Is he there? Mr. Jeevan Kumar Malla, could you kindly confirm? Host, could you kindly confirm, please?
Just now he called me. Mr. Kadamji, you please unmute. Hello.
Dr. Kadam, are you there? Kindly respond.
Ma'am, I think he's not in the participant list. Can you just call him, Jeevan sir?
Okay. Otherwise, you tell to the doctor to address a vote of thanks.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Dhananjay? Are you referring to Dr. Dhananjay?
Yes.
Okay, sure. Dr. Dhananjay, I request you to kindly propose the vote of thanks.
Dr.
Host,
Dhananjay.
He's not unmuted. Actually, he's still on mute. Could someone kindly unmute?
Yes.
Yes. You're not audible, sir. We can't hear you. Dr. Dhananjay, we are unable to hear you. Not.
No.
Oh, dearie.
Participants, I request you to kindly be patient. Bear with us for a minute or two. I'm sure this will get solved.
So there is some problem with this audio feed, sir.
Yes, 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 yes.
I think we can unable to hear him, so we can proceed with the vote of thanks.
Yes, you request Mr. Karpaya. Karpaya is here, the principal of KV.
Yes, sir.
You unmute, you know? Mr. Karpaya?
Mr. Karupaya? I did
P.
see him.
Karpaya. P. Karpaya.
Yes, he was there actually. In the
Yes,
beginning,
yes,
of
yes.
course. Take note. I don't think he's there now, actually. He's not there in the forum right now, I guess. Doesn't show on the participants list.
No, no, no.
Yeah,
He's
he's
here.
there. He's there. He's there.
Yes, yes. Mr. Karpaya. Hello? Yes.
Mr. Jeevan Kumar Malla, I suggest we ask somebody else to propose the vote of thanks other than Mr. Karupaya. Maybe he has network issues or so. Anybody else? I don't think he is responding. I mean, I don't think he will be able to respond right now.
Mr. Tarani is there from Odisha.
All participants.
Yes, Mr. Suraj Bhan, right?
Yeah, sir.
Would
yes.
you like
Good evening.
Yes. Yes.
Sir,
Go ahead, sir. We can't hear you. Mr. Suraj Bhan, we are unable to hear you.
yeah. Ma'am,
Hmm.
when people will unite together to agitate against this kind of policies which are created to destroy our community, why we are not being our habits? So how can we agitate against this? We should unite each other. Little much explain me what we can do for our community and society.
So, Mr. Suraj Bhan, would you want to, is your question directed to Mr. Jeevan Kumar Malla? To whom is your question
Yeah.
directed? Okay. Mr. Jeevan,
Against the agitator.
sir, your voice is breaking actually. We are not able to hear you properly. However, we've got the question and I'm putting this question.
Actually,
to
I'm
Mr.
already having his number. I will talk to him later.
Okay.
Because first of all, you, Professor Ponsilvi,
Yes.
you yourself give a vote of thanks.
Vote of thanks, yeah.
Because our journalism is waiting.
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
We are, once again, we are sorry. I mean, we are extremely apologetic for this inconvenience that took place. We'll move ahead with the vote of thanks.
Vote of thanks, sir. No?
Yes.
Vote of thanks. He's answering the questions. It is not the time of to have a question. No, give the vote of thanks to all the participants so that.
Correct. Yes, we are going ahead with it. Right. So, first of all, it is my privilege to propose the vote of thanks. I thank all our distinguished speakers of the day. First of all, I thank Dr. Dhananjay Kumar for having agreed to deliver the welcome address and for having also initiated as much as possible from his end to propose the vote of thanks, although there was a technical error. We understand that, totally understood. Our next gratitude is due to Mr. Jeevan Kumar Malla. Thank you, sir, for that inspirational speech. Thank you for bringing in that awakening to to march towards ruling this country. I would also like to thank Mr. Lalit Kumar, who had agreed to be a part of this program today, although he has not been able to join because of his ill health. A special thanks to Dr. Jawahar Nasim for all those words of wisdom, in fact, pearls of wisdom. We can't thank you enough, sir. I also express my gratitude to Mr. Jitendra Kardam. I'm sure he made all efforts to be present here and to also deliver the vote of thanks. Again, it's technology, it's technicalities, and sometimes these things do happen. And it will only make us more human to understand and bear with these things. I thank the organizers with all my heart for having arranged this meeting, which intellectually boosts every participant. All the same, I thank every participant who has been here, who has supported here with your involvement and with all the questions that you posted, showing your interactive capacity. Thank you once again, audience. I would like to also request Jeevan Kumar Malla sir to take a note on the chat section message which asks him to hold similar discussion on the NAP 2020 next Sunday between 6:30 to 7:30. So people are interested in a series of Zoom meetings. Thanks to the program, thanks to the organizers. A special thanks once again to Dr. Jawahar Nasim. We are all on the same paths, but sometimes we walk in different and even opposite directions, overlooking the fact that this will never lead us to our destination. To have power in your hands, to create educational policies that do not stifle people. Let us walk on the same path and in the same direction and conquer power. Action, my dear audience, without knowledge is insanity, and knowledge without action is vanity. My dear participants, with all the knowledge we've received this evening, let us all work towards effectuating a meaningful, desirable change. A very big thank you to all of you once again, my dear audience, as well as all the speakers for being here with us today and for being amazingly involved and for taking the time to participate in this online program, either as listeners or as speakers. With this, my dear audience, we declare that this program has come to a close. Signing off is Professor Ponselvi from Mumbai. Bye. Take care until we meet on another similar forum. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
madam.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I give a special thank those who are watching in the YouTube also. A lot of people are watching in YouTube also. So I give my special thank to them also. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you
Thank
all.
you, sir.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Chaudhary sir, I will call you later. Bansilal Chaudhary ji, I will call you later. Huh?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Rakesh?
Sir, yes, sir. Can we end the meeting, sir?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.